Hi, our guest today is James Ligor, who's running for a seat on the Milford School Committee in the April 5th town election. Welcome, Jim.
Welcome.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for having me.
And I guess the most obvious question is, why are you running for school committee?
It's a great question. I've been asked that a few times, and I can honestly say from my position on the personnel board, I thought this was a natural progression for the civic duty that I've been associated with the town. I have 2 boys in the school system. I've been an active parent, my wife and I, and I've also been active in youth sports as well from a coaching capacity. So this seemed like a natural next step for me. I wanted to look for a way to give back to the town a little more than what we've been doing on the personnel board. I have enjoyed my tenure with the personnel board over the last 10 years, a few of those years as chairman, getting to go to town meeting and participating in civic activities through the board has been fantastic. But I think at this point in my life, I'd like to try to take that to the next level and see which ways I can give back to the school committee.
Okay.
Well,
Go ahead.
any issues that come to mind? Anything that you want to focus on?
The 2 areas that I'd love to participate in would be the technology area. On the personnel board, we had the opportunity to classify the technology director, and I know
Which
that
one?
Which? So I know that's been
1, 2, 3, the school one or the new town one?
and now it's kind of come full circle,
Right.
and I guess that's part of the overall dialogue and discussion. Certainly, we need someone for the town. I was actually of the mindset that we would have someone for the town and someone for the school system dedicated directly to the school system. I think that the district has a lot of challenges in front of it, not only bringing the infrastructure up to speed, but also setting the direction and the roadmap and tying the technology section into curriculum in terms of how we move forward in that direction.
Okay.
So that's one of the areas. We were talking before we went on camera. I work in the technology field, in the technology sector. And one of the things that I had brought up in side discussions was whether or not it made sense to have a hardware infrastructure versus moving to a cloud platform. I had found a couple of case studies actually regarding some school districts, one particularly in Spokane, Washington, that moved a 22-building school district to a cloud environment. So there's total cost of ownership models associated with both hardware, traditional hardware, and cloud-based environment.
Okay.
So obviously you have, there's personnel involved in the traditional hardware model as opposed to program management associated with the cloud-based model. So without getting into a lot of the specifics here, I think there's some opportunity to look at maybe, do we have the right process in place for scalability as the school district moves forward, gets bigger, has different needs, et cetera. I know the school committee has addressed a lot of these issues too, so I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but certainly there's room for discussion there, not only from a town perspective, but also as it relates to the district.
Okay.
So one of the other topics that I thought was interesting, that would relate to some of the numbers that we had been seeing from the finance committee was the number of kids leaving the school district.
Mostly at the elementary level.
Yeah, I think that, and even in my, personal experience with my 2 boys being, my oldest is a freshman and my youngest is in 5th grade, we have a heavy involvement with, or a lot of interaction with parents within those grade levels.
Well, now, granted, they did a very small sampling of the parents who had transferred their kids to a different district.
Yeah.
But there was a common factor there that I don't think anybody can overcome. And it kind of, it didn't surprise me in ways. People were complaining that the school system was too, and the code word was diverse. which is a nice way of saying, I don't like who my kids are going to school with,
Yeah.
so I'm going to move them out.
Yeah.
You know, a new Woodland is not going to solve that. I mean, Milford is a very diverse community.
And it always has been.
The schools, it always has been, whether it was waves of Irish, Italian, Portuguese, Brazilian, Ecuadorian, Egyptian, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So if that's the issue, I don't think any one school committee person's going to solve it. But what would you do to make the system more attractive, or at least LA parents' fears that their school is too diverse?
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I have heard a lot of that,
By the way, can I interrupt just to say, lest
Sure.
people think I'm in any kind of racist. I went to a inner city high school in Newark, New Jersey,
Yeah.
that was 1/3 white, 1/3 black, 1/3 Puerto Rican. So I understand diversity. I have no problem with it. I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, no,
Because
of course.
sometimes when
No,
you
no,
question things or you make fun of them, people assume that you're a
Yeah.
racist or against ethnic groups. I'm not. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No,
but-
no problem at all. And certainly, to Al's point, Milford has been a diverse environment for many, many years.
Many years.
So I don't think that's new. Having been born and raised in the town, I can assure you that I myself associated with several ethnic groups growing up. I mean, we all had friends that were, that came from different backgrounds.
That's what makes Milford such a great place.
Yeah, actually,
it makes
it
it a very
does.
strong
And,
community.
I mean, there's a lot of from when my parents grew up and the ethnic diversity down at the down at the Plains.
Yep.
To when we grow up, we spent a lot of time at the Heights, and so we all know that. I mean, what I think that we lack, what the school district should consider maybe doing moving forward is individualized messaging. And I'm not quite sure we communicate our value proposition as thoroughly as we should. I believe that the district does a lot of things well, and I think we need to communicate that message back out to the parent base on a regular, reoccurring cycle.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is BVT, Blackstone Valley Regional, by virtue of the fact it draws from 11 or 13 towns,
Yeah.
they really market themselves
Absolutely.
to the world.
Yeah.
They want to be an alternate choice. And, every time you look, there's a press release or a marketing blurb or something.
Yep.
But the public schools in the area don't. And maybe when you say, individual communication, it's more marketing. than
Well, it
Milford
really
Public
is. I
School
mean,
System.
I was going to say this is an exercise in tactical marketing. I mean, to get more specific, I think we should have a targeted message towards our academic environment, our athletic complex, and our enrichment process. And I think we need to communicate those effectively in each category, because I think that there is a different parent set that is out looking for some type of insight into each one of those areas. I mean, when we went to school, you didn't have to go out and recruit your student base. Today, there are a lot of options for people to consider, particularly from from a athletic perspective.
Athletic, private school,
yeah.
a Voctech school,
Absolutely.
the Norfolk Aggie. I mean,
Yep.
just in the area. I agree. Growing up in the public school environment, I mean, you went to your town's high school.
Bingo.
That's
Yeah,
it. But we've got a lot of very good percentages, and if you look at the cohort 5-year average, Milford has a 93-94% graduation rate. We've got a very high college acceptance rate. We've got kids going to D1, D2 schools, but I'm not quite sure that message reaches the community. I think that we need to do more at promoting that, and we need to do more at changing the perception of the district that we are doing things in the right way.
The dilemma is, in my mind, every school, every public school makes a claim on the number of kids going on to college. The statistic that is never divulged or never given are the people that complete.
College.
Yes, that is true.
That's a statistic that I think should be given to everybody, because that goes more to the quality of the education
Yep.
than how many got into the school. The
Yeah.
real question is how many got through the school.
And you're absolutely right. And when I did some research on the numbers for Milford and some other area towns, and you cannot find completion rates, or at least I couldn't find completion rates. So if they exist,
I don't think the colleges give them out.
it's probably pretty well. I would imagine that that information is probably pretty well kept.
I don't know how a school would track it down. If student X went to UMass, let's say 200 kids from a class of 1,000 all went to the UMass campuses.
Yep.
is UMass going to, give you the completion rate if you give them their names?
Well, they'll give you the graduation.
The graduation date.
Graduation data
Yeah.
is available. So it would not be an easy task.
No.
But it would be worth doing at least one time
Oh,
to get visibility.
I agree.
I think you'd want to trend it if it was possible. But to Al's point, you could take your graduating class from 2014 or 2012 and go back and find out how many of them actually graduated high school.
I know I've got a 23-year-old son who did 2 years of college and dropped out to go to work.
Yep.
I happen to know, just because of talking to him and his friends, a large number of his friends also dropped out of four-year college and all went to the same type of work environment. And they all did it for pretty much the same reason. I mean, there's a cluster of them. And it's interesting if you track that and find out why.
It is interesting. I mean, that's a great. I think it's a great data point. I think, like Al said, it would probably take a lot of effort to compile that number. I think it would speak to the school system. I think it would speak to the level of education. But to your point as well, I think there's certain variables associated with postgraduate.
Well, would you also take the people in the new hospitality program and check to see in a couple of years how many of them have gone on jobs in the hotel and food industry?
Well, I mean, I personally think it's a worthwhile exercise to do that and start to build some level of trending for the program. I think it allows you to recognize whether or not you're actually adding value in the program. I mean,
I think it does several things, but one of the things it does that, but it also gives the parents of kids going to school or going to the public school information that it just doesn't end when they walk out the door of the school. You keep track of the environment, and you have test points going along the road that says, okay, to get this, I have to change here. When I was on the school committee, my analogy was, it's like a factory. And you bring raw ingredients in the front door, and the back door out go high school graduates.
Yeah.
And
so you need to have test points to make sure that occurs properly.
I'd also think in the case of the hospitality thing, that you don't want to, check 10 years from now and find out nobody's gotten a job in the industry.
Right.
Because what was the investment for?
Right. And that's actually, I think that supports Al's position.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think you could really speak to the validity of your program if you were able to say that 96% of your constituency is working today.
Well, it's interesting. I look at myself now. In your case, you graduated, you went into the field that you trained in theoretically.
Actually, I didn't.
Well, there you go. And by education, I'm an electrical engineer.
I was always going to be. I always wanted to be a high school English teacher. Didn't make it.
So and I worked in the industry for 25 years, and then what relativity does that have to publish in a newspaper? Zero and nothing. But the long and short of it is, people go through changes through their career, but the tools they graduate from high school and college with are really what allow them to make those changes.
Right.
And so, in my mind, that starts at kindergarten, and you establish certain tools and things, and so you need to measure that along the way. And I don't think any of the public schools do an excellent job of that. They try, but nobody does it.
No, I'm not quite sure that there's that level of focus exists there. I mean, to me, it makes sense to do that. But again,
I'm also not sure, though, you could sit there and sit before the Milford Finance Committee and say we're adding a position whose job is to check what's going on with the people who have graduated from college.
No,
you're right. You're right.
I'm not quite sure.
And they'd look at you and go, scratch that one off.
That doesn't. You're right. You're absolutely correct.
I mean, it's not. That's the difference between a private company, whereas a company with a marketing department, it would be very common to employ somebody to say, what are people doing with our product? I mean, that's why you get those annoying, blow-in cards when you buy something to respond what your likes and dislikes are.
Or the call.
So they can, they call or try to tailor it. And
I don't think it would be out of the question to ask for a focus team, though, off the school committee, with maybe a resource or two from the high school to try to do something like that.
You went around to like the 5 and 10 year and 15-year reunions.
Yeah.
That would
ask people there and
great.
say, you know what, as a connector to your reunion.
And there have been a lot of high school reunions here in Milford of classes. That would be perfect.
Well, you always get the early years at a reunion, and then there's to the gap, and then usually when your kids are grown, it's like, I want to get back in touch with the people who either made my life miserable or I really loved.
Right.
And then you do it. So that wouldn't be a bad idea. But
Yeah.
Now, the next question, I do have a question
Sure.
for you relative. You have kids in the system,
Yes, I have two.
and having personally experienced being on a school committee with a child in the system, it raises a lot of challenges because you have a child in the system, so you'll be connected on a day-to-day basis, not as a school committee member, but as a parent in the system. And how are you going to deal with that? Really, it's a dichotomy of how you can address things, because you may go in to deal with an issue with your child, and the person you're dealing with is going to look at you and say, okay, are you a school committee member talking to me? Are you a parent talking to me?
Well, that's an excellent question, Al. But I mean, I tell you right off the bat, I came from two public school teachers I was raised by. So at our house, I go in as a parent, and I want to know what's going on with my child in the classroom. I think that as a school committee member, you want to deal with policy as it relates to top level and how that flows through the curriculum. But if I were to go in and deal with Josh or deal with Jake, I'm going in to deal with Josh and Jake, and I'm going in as dad.
Okay.
to follow up on that, we know there are what I call the statutory duties of a school committee member. Either preparing a budget on your own as a committee or dealing with the administration preparing it. There's the hiring and firing of a superintendent. Well, that's done.
Yeah, right.
There's the
Policies.
policy. What's the fourth one, Al?
Oh, well, it's hiring and firing the superintendent, policy, and budget. Those are the three things.
And budget. But let's face it, what most school committee members hear from other people in the community, whether they're usually parents, is my son didn't make a sports team. I want my kid on this bus route, not that bus route.
Yeah.
He's not doing well in this class. Can we switch him to another teacher?
Yeah.
So it's nice to talk in the higher levels.
Yep. No, I
But in
agree.
reality, I think most of the constituent work is more the lower level stuff. Are you prepared for that as well?
Those are the calls you get.
Yes, and you know what, and that's okay. I mean, I view these types of things, both as having both internal and external customers. So, you've got the people that you work with on the board, but then, you do have a responsibility to the parents and the children of the town. And you do have to fill questions like that. And even though you don't directly have an impact on whether or not the child needs
Yeah.
a bus, I still think it's within your scope to at least elevate the issue to somebody who has responsibility over that. So if you run for the role and you get the seat, you get everything that comes along with it, good, bad, or indifferent. So,
Okay, but it's different than your role on the personnel board, which
Yeah.
usually, for those who don't know, is private meetings with typically a department head
Yep.
trying to create a new position, set a salary for it, or change the job description and
job
salary for
description,
somebody,
right.
or doing what the personnel board's involved in now, doing every 10-year
Yeah, study,
compensation
compensation study, yeah.
right.
they tend to be more private and quiet than,
It's
Yes.
much more visible in a school committee.
Yep.
I always, when I was involved in schools, and I was blessed, I got to serve with 5 other members that were absolutely great people, and we all had a common vision. That's why we got to move an agenda forward, because of that. But generally speaking, I always thought there were 3 things: a budget, hiring, firing superintendent, and policy. But those 3 things all go together to create a safe environment where education can flourish. That was my global kind of thing that I looked at. And that's really the question at hand. The parents will come to you, and my son didn't get in this football team, or wasn't treated fairly. Those are the common questions you'll get from specific parents. But in a general sense, your responsibility as a school committee is more global, not specific to a specific individual. And so those are the questions. You'll have to fend off those questions sometimes. You have to say, you have to talk to the superintendent, but I'll have him give you a call.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what I was implying, is that you can't you can't actually field a deliverable for all of those, but you do have to spend face time
I think you're more the
addressing the issue.
yeah, you're more the
know.
connection
Yes.
to get them an answer.
Yep.
Right.
You're the conduit, and you still and so you still have a role and a responsibility there,
Right.
to the person who's addressing that with you. You don't have to, I would imagine, and maybe in some cases you do champion some of those through, but in most cases you are going to defer those off to to the subject
When
matter.
if it has a global impact on
Yeah.
the district, on the school system,
Yep.
then you do have a responsibility to be involved in it. But when it's a specific individual or something like that,
Yeah.
then it becomes a special interest kind of thing.
Exactly.
So it's a difficult thing. And the question is, you're going to ask, what do you think about this, or what do you think about that? That's going to be the parents going to ask you, well, what do you think about this? And that's going to be the questions that are going to be tough for you.
Well, I've got a what do you think about this?
Okay.
As you know, Superintendent Tremblay is leaving,
Yes.
and the school committee rather unanimously and quickly picked the assistant, Kevin McIntyre, to replace him. Are you satisfied with that process, or would you have liked to look outside the system?
You know, quite honestly, I actually was satisfied with the process. And the reason I say that is because I believe in succession planning. I believe in roadmap, and I believe in continuity. So having worked in private industry my whole career, I like the idea of developing somebody within the organization and giving them the opportunity to grow within that role to, flourish into something that you put time and energy into developing.
Yeah, I will tell you, from Bob's perspective, we had him here on the program a couple of months ago. His feeling is it's making the transition a heck of a lot easier,
I think,
because you're dealing with a known quantity who's already in the system,
yeah,
who basically was his right hand.
right.
And now it's up to Dr. McIntyre to find the new right hand.
Right.
Right.
For him
And
to
let
train
me
it.
also preface by saying that, if you had somebody that was not qualified for the role,
Right.
moving them internally upwards, may or may not be a good idea. You may have to go outside of the system to find what you need in a skill set.
And that's not necessarily always an easy task either.
It's
'cause you
not,
can-
right.
Because when you have a known quantity,
Yeah.
and then you go outside and you have a snapshot into that unknown quantity, sometimes this one is better because you know what you're getting.
Absolutely.
Now, I think with the current situation, has been a fantastic move, I think, personally. I think it was a
I mean,
good move.
and
Personally, I would agree, because, Dr. McIntyre is a known quantity, and when you have a unanimous vote of the school committee, they obviously felt the same way.
yeah, well,
If they didn't, you would have had a 5-2.
Right.
Yep.
4
So
and
it worked out
3.
great, I think.
I mean, Kevin has added a lot of value to the system. I
Right.
mean, we know that. I know that as a parent. So, the idea that you would move him into that role, to me, was a natural, succession to Bob. And, from what I understand now, having gone to some of the school committee meetings and listening,
Right.
it seems like they were really more of a co-environment rather than just Bob and Kevin.
Bob's
so.
wife, I don't know if you heard this on the show, Bob's wife has described them to me as twins.
Good. And that's great. I love to hear that. I love the idea that
Bob was lucky enough, I think, to find somebody, the same mindset, the
Yep.
same personality, the same drive, who's not going to change.
So it means
Things a lot.
continuity.
Right.
Continuity in system. So those people involved in the system don't see any radical changes. They see continuity, which really is good for a system, because then you
What's
got enough
important
trouble.
about that is I remember reading an article by the former superintendent of Washington, D.C. schools. Now, I don't know how to run a school system. I don't. She did. And she said the biggest single thing, in her opinion, harming local school systems was the changing superintendents, where the life of a superintendent is about 2 years in the state.
2.5, yep.
2.5.
Okay, and you had Bob is on what, 9, 10?
Yeah, yes.
Up there. Now you're going to have more continuity, that it's good to have no major changes, because the system can go forward
Yep.
with a plan over a number of years, as opposed to every 2 years, somebody new coming in and trying to change everything.
Well,
Exactly.
one of the things Bob did when he came on board was to make some significant changes in the system generally.
Well, he's named every principal in every school.
So as a result, he stabilized the system, and the nice thing about it is the new guy coming in now has the opportunity to move it into the next
Yeah.
move to the next stage.
Yeah, I think
I think Bob did.
Yeah.
Bob stacked the bench.
Yes.
And Kevin has the breadth to
That's a good,
in the
good
skill
stack
set
the bench.
to
I like that.
to go.
What he- yeah.
That they. To Al's point, he leveled the playing field. So he now has the skill and the strength he needs in each one of those categories.
Yeah, unlike the Mendon Upton district, where a couple of years ago, the outgoing superintendent well, they were retiring, but he named 3 of the 4 principals
And gave him a
and then
5-year.
left and gave them raises. And then his successor got hired and basically had 3 people he could have filled, but his predecessor did. So the new superintendent was saddled, not in a bad word, but stuck with 3 people he had no role in appointing.
Yeah, it's,
Not a good move, where I would have left them for the successor to fill
Yeah.
and put acting people in and let
Yep.
the new person judge. Well, since there's not a lot of change going on, maybe the only item of controversy is what to do with the Middle East building.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent topic.
Because whether or not the committee, whatever the study committee recommends,
Yep.
the school committee still has to give the building up if they want to.
right.
Yes, I know.
So do
School
you have any
committee.
thoughts on that?
I know Scott is chairing a subcommittee, that is dealing with that. And last Thursday's meeting, he presented a lengthy study and finding from the consulting firm doing that.
Right.
So I don't have a detailed opinion on that. I don't have enough background to really form an opinion. If I were to give you an opinion, it would be as a resident, and I would, if I had any, thought process on it, I would like to see. I'd personally like to see the building stay in a way that it could help support the district. If there was a way that you could revitalize that building or revitalize it to some more targeted initiatives like enrichment or some type of an outsourced college or
All I hear is don't lose the gym.
yeah, well, that is actually very true. I mean, Lenny doesn't have a lot of spots. We all know that. We know that the new Woodland is going to take on, is going to have a full-size gymnasium, but we really need to hold on to the Middle East gym. That's for certain. I can tell you that as a coach. But getting back to your question, I know that they're already well into that discussion.
Yeah, the
I
final
don't-
report's coming out before the election, so.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'd like to see the building stay within the district. I think the school could still use the footprint.
I mean, they were talking moving the superintendent and administration offices down there.
I don't really want. I mean, personally, I wouldn't like to see it just become office space. I think it could be revitalized to add to the curriculum. You might want to put, particular curriculum activities within that building. I had one thought on it that regarded trying to put together a, something like a vocational or a special interest group that might help, with the matriculation that we're seeing out of the system to BVT.
Well, the problem is you can't do that. Vocational instruction has to be in a vocational school.
Oh, so you can't renovate that
You
school?
you couldn't make it a vocational.
As long as you're not duplicating what's in the vocational school.
Yeah, well, the problem
Hence
is,
the hospitality program.
so
Right,
the dilemma you have is that you're really limited to what you can do with it from a vocational
Yeah, I
standpoint.
mean, you can't go and decide you're going to put a carpentry shop
Or an
in there.
electrician, or.
Well, I know there's a lot of talk about using it as town offices or perhaps subbing it out or. There was even some discussion as to whether or not you'd want to convert it to condominiums or something like that.
Yeah, well, I know for people of a certain age, they still have the memory of it as the high school.
Yes.
And for people younger, they have the memory of going to school there.
Yeah.
But I hear a little beep which is telling us it's time to wrap up. Any last words to the voters on why they should vote for you?
No, I mean, I am definitely committed to doing the best I can for that seat. Again, I think I bring 10 years of town civics with me, plus the motivation and the drive of having 2 kids in the system, and quite a bit of private industry experience that I think I can bring to the table too. So I hope that wraps up into a attractive package for the voters, and I'm going to be out there doing my best.
Okay, thanks for being with us,
Thank you.
Jim.
Thank you, guys. I
And
appreciate
good luck
it.
in the election.
Thank you.